Good afternoon, everybody. As Halim says, my name is Nick Pilcher. I'm a sea turtle biologist by training, and sort of more seeking fun and having all kinds of fun out in the ocean is really what I like doing. What I thought I'd present to you today was some ideas about some practical solutions to marine conservation. And the reason behind this is because I think I've sat through the last 2 years, like everybody else, listening to talks on Zoom and everything. And a lot of it's theoretical. And we can sit and talk about marine conservation for as long as we want, but unless we actually start doing something about it at some point, then it gets to the point where nothing really happens. And so I thought I'd share with you just a couple of examples today of how the work that we do is aimed at driving policy change in many ways. We do research, I agree, but we don't do research for the fun of it. We do research so that we can answer some management-related questions and put data on the table that will allow policy change. So, with that in mind, first couple of minutes about what is the Marine Research Foundation. It's a small little NGO that we established back in 2003 in Kota Kinabalu in Sabah. We have a whole whopping 4 full-time staff. That's it. It's a massive agency. We have occasional short-time staff, and we do take in interns across the year. Normally, there will be 2 or 3 interns in the office at any point in time. We've been running this project on turtle excluder devices, which I'll speak about in a couple of minutes, since 2007. We've been running dugong conservation programs across their geographical range since 2010. And that covers all the way from about the east coast of Africa all the way through to the Western Pacific. We've been working on shark and ray bycatch since 2019. Whoops. And then we've been running this in-water foraging ground project since 2006. And one of the things I want you to take away from this is some of these projects take a very, very long time. You don't solve marine conservation challenges and knowledge needs in a year or 2. Normally, these projects take time and they require long-term investment of funds and energy and resources. So moving on to the first project, which is related to sea turtles and turtle excluder devices. Bycatch is probably the largest threat to turtles in Malaysia. And bycatch is when a fisherman goes fishing, puts his nets in the water to catch fish or shrimp, but also ends up with an endangered sea turtle in the nest, or a shark or a ray. So bycatch is just simply the incidental catch of other non-target species. So in Malaysia, nesting beaches are pretty much all protected. And in fact, this is the case across much of sea turtles' range. We're really good at protecting the beaches. But the truth is that sea turtles spend 99.9% of their time at sea. And that's what we need to focus on. Egg harvests have been controlled. There's a slight amount of sea turtle harvest, either for their meat or for their shell, a little bit of transport or trade, nothing that I would worry about from a population level standpoint. And I'm going to make it clear that while it's illegal and it's wrong on numerous fronts, at a population level, the numbers just really are not problematic. The same thing with boat strikes and some sort of uncontrolled tourism that might impact turtles. there might be small impacts, but these are small and probably not worth worrying about. But bycatch is without a doubt the biggest problem we have with sea turtles. And this is just a little picture of a sea turtle caught in a fishing net. Not very happy about the entire thing, as you can imagine. In Malaysia, the largest problem comes from shrimp trawl fisheries. And this is because shrimp and sea turtles just happen to love to live in the same place, which is unfortunate. Sea turtles tend to remain in coastal waters. You can see in this picture, the coast is not far behind. And the reason they do that is because they're lazy. And they don't, you know, if you were living out in deep water where you had to rest on the seabed at 100 meters, that's a long way to swim to the surface to take a breath. And keep in mind that turtles are reptiles and therefore need the surface to breathe. And because they need to breathe, they tend to stay in shallow waters. And these shallow waters are the same waters where shrimp trawling efforts take place. So the solution to bycatch with shrimp trawlers is the use of turtle excluder devices. And a turtle excluder device is nothing more than a metal grid. It can have a variety of shapes, but basically it's got some bars that are approximately 10 centimeters apart, and fish and the shrimp go through the bars and end up at the back of the net, while something big, like a sea turtle, gets pushed out through a cloth flap. And the work we do is introducing these to fishermen and to fisheries department officers in order to get them regulated and part of the law in Malaysia. And so our team run training workshops with fishermen across Malaysia, not just in Sabah, but across Peninsular Malaysia as well. And they teach them how to sew the TED, the turtle excluder device, into the net, and how to get those into the net onto the boats, and then typically running trials to measure the effectiveness of a boat with a TED and a boat without a TED. And I say we as MRF, but the truth is this young lady, Liana, she leads the program, and she is the heartbeat or the heart and soul of our TED program. She knows, she works with fishermen across the country, and she can sew a fishing net just as well as they can. And so it's quite a surprise, you know, to see her show up in a fishing port and whip out sewing needles and start showing fishermen how all this works. It gets some amazing stares. But the point about this is that the TED is a low-cost device. It's a low-technology device. You can see, in this case, the thing is hanging from the top, but in reality, it would be turned on its side. And you can imagine how shrimp and fish can go through the bars, whereas a sea turtle would hit that and come out through the flap, which is on Liana's side. So this is a very, very practical way of solving sea turtle bycatch. And here you can see a turtle that's caught in a trawl net and ends up going towards the back, cannot go through the bars, but can escape and ends up swimming free. And TEDs are about 99.9% effective at solving the bycatch problem in Malaysia. The thing is, you just have to do it. You have to get out there and you have to introduce them. You have to get fishermen to buy into the project, and you have to get the government to buy into the project. And what we've been able to do over the years is get it to where all of the East Coast states in Peninsular Malaysia now have a legal requirement for TEDs. So that is from Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, and Johor, all the way down the East Coast, where there's a large number of trawlers. And we estimate, based on the average catch rates of turtles per boat, that just having those 4 states is probably saving around 500 sea turtles every year. So, you know, this is not just once or twice that it happens, but as long as fishing boats continue using turtle excluder devices, then turtles will continue to be saved. And Liana continues to work throughout Sabah.
We cannot see your slide if you supposed to
It's
show
okay.
something.
There's no slide yet.
Okay.
So I was waiting on that. I was just saying that Liana works hard running these workshops, and our hope is that in the coming years, we see the rest of Malaysia go TED compliant. And just as a point of note, Malaysia is the only country in all of Asia to have implemented turtle excluder devices and have a legal requirement for them. That's pretty impressive. Moving on to another project, we have the shark and ray bycatch project. And this is something that we came to quite recently. We were invited to participate in a forum to present the successes of our turtle work. And before you know it, we were involved in solving problems for sharks and rays. And to put this a little bit into context, whoops, sorry about the spelling mistake. Sharks and rays have declined in massive numbers over the years across the globe. And many of them end up on endangered species lists and on CITES trade ban lists. The number of species keeps on growing every time there is a review or people have any meetings. And bycatch and high capture rates account for the majority of this mortality. And in Sabah, that is probably the same case. What do I mean by probably? Well, the problem is that we really don't have data upon which to make some important management decisions. We don't have data from 30 years ago and data from last year that can tell us exactly what population changes have occurred. Although we do know that there's a lot less sharks and rays being landed, we just don't have a handle on the numbers. And when you go to the fisheries department and you say, oh, you know, we really want to protect this species of shark, that's not possible in the absence of data. Can you imagine the director of fisheries goes to his minister and says, well, we think we should protect sharks. Based on what data? Well, we don't have any, sir, but we really think we should protect them. You can see how in the absence of data, management becomes problematic. The biggest problem is that when fishing boats leave port, they travel hundreds of kilometers north, south, east, or west, and we have really no idea where and when sharks and rays get caught. And this lack of information is probably the single largest bottleneck to effective management in the state. So the way we solve that is by designing and building some homegrown time-lapse cameras. And these cameras take a photograph every 5 seconds of the deck of a fishing boat. And each one of those photographs is geotagged, much like the photographs on your smartphones. It has a latitude and longitude. That means that at any point in time, sorry, let me just go back. At any point in time when the camera takes a photograph, we know where it is and therefore where the bycatch occurs. And again, I keep on saying we, but the truth is that the young KC here, she really is the leader of this program, and she's our Techno geek. She's going to kill me for showing this picture, but she really, when she joined us at MRF, you know, she'd never used a soldering iron or anything like that, and now she knows this stuff way better than I ever could. And she really runs this program. She's the heart and soul of that. So what do we actually do? Well, a lot of the work is actually deploying and monitoring these cameras. The top right photograph is actually top down looking at one of the cameras, but it also gives you a good idea of what the camera sees of the deck of a fishing boat. And then the other pictures, you can see our team deploying them, which involves climbing precariously up onto the mast of fishing boats and attaching these cameras. And the cameras have a battery power system, and that battery is charged up by a solar panel. And so these boats can be out for a couple of weeks collecting data. With that data, what we then can do is we actually know when and where bycatch events occurred. And with that information, we can start to populate some important maps. Now, here's an example of one. You can see a ray right down here in the bottom center of the image. This is just a standard picture taken. This is a picture taken at night, and I hope you can all see the big shark right there in the middle. No? Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. This is the one with the sea turtle. If you look at the guy with the pink jacket, he's holding a big, massive sea turtle. And I'm pleased to tell you that 2 seconds later, that turtle went swimming over the side. And here you can see a big, massive shark in the image. These are just some examples of the photographs that the cameras take. And some of them are really obvious. You can see a nice big wedgefish here that's just very clear to the image. You can see a big ray here. These are very clear to the image, but then some of them are a little bit less obvious. There's a spotted eagle ray, a little baby one right here in this image. And if you can see in this one, there's a small shark up in the top right of the image. So some of them are very easy to see. Some of them are not quite so easy. And another challenge is that we collect a photograph every 5 seconds. That's slightly over 17,000 photographs per day. And we have 35 cameras. And we go through all of the images one by one manually. And people have asked why we don't have some sort of an artificial intelligence program to do this. And so I put it out to all of you that are working in Singapore to come up with a solution. But the biggest problem is that you can all picture what a shark looks like, right? It's got a fin above the top of its body, and it's got pectoral fins and a big tail. But we typically don't see a shark or a ray in that exact perfect position. Sometimes they might be pointing straight up. Sometimes they might be upside down. Sometimes they might be on their side. Sometimes they might be half buried by other fish and other species. This is a great photograph because it was taken during the day, but 50% of our photographs are taken at night where we have much worse lighting. So it's not as easy as it sounds to develop an artificial intelligence system that could go through the images. But the challenge is out there for all of you in Singapore that we can provide you with about 2,000 images to seed a program. And let's see if we can come up with something. So the challenge is set. To show you how we use this data, though, is that we can then develop density analyses for where bycatch events occur. And when we have sufficient events in a month, we can actually do that on a monthly basis. And the reason why we break it down by month is because in terms of fishery management, rather than say, we should just ban fishing, what we would rather do is say, it would be good if we could ban fishing in this little small area during these months. Now, you can fish in other places, but from say March to October, this little area needs to be protected. And that's a very effective fishery management measure. We call it a time area closure. Or we could have a gear restriction. So yes, you can still fish in this area, but you cannot use a trawler. you know, there might be a number of ways to solve this that work equally well for fishermen as they do for conservation. And this is just two particular highlights. And the top one is the sightings of wedgefish. And we raise these because these are critically endangered on IUCN Red List. And what you will find is there is that one hotspot up there on the northeast coast of Sabah where the majority of these species are being caught. And so what this tells us is this is a critical area that we need to focus on in conservation. And just imagine that prior to us undertaking this work, nobody would have ever known that. All we would have ever known is that these species are endangered and it's a pity. But now, with KC's work, we have some amazing data that tells us exactly what little corner of the ocean needs to be protected. The same thing with hammerhead sharks, and interestingly enough, they're occupying the same little area at sea. So it looks like we might have an opportunity to protect a particular little corner of the ocean and have a massive impact on shark and ray bycatch mitigation. Another interesting outcome of KC's work is that just purely by accident, she realized that a big, massive chunk of fishing and, of course, bycatch was happening inside of a marine protected area. The dark green shadow on this graphic is actually the Malaysia's largest marine park, the Tun Mustafa Marine Park, which is a multiple use marine park, meaning that fishing is allowed, but it also provides us with a window of opportunity to come up with some sort of a management measure to further protect species that are being threatened. And you can see by this graphic here, this is a hotspot analysis of where the majority of sharks are being taken. And you can see it lies right inside the park boundary. Again, here you can see hotspot analysis of where rays are being taken. And again, these hotspots lie mostly inside of the park boundary. Wedge fishes are right there on the boundary of the park. And you can see that sea turtles are also being taken within inside the park boundary. Now, the park was set up to protect endangered species, to protect the habitats. And so this is an incredible opportunity for us to work not only with the fisheries department in coming up with fisheries management measures, but also with the parks department in coming up with spatial restrictions that might better protect sharks and rays. Then what you do is you take, and I apologize that I don't have this graphic for sharks and rays, but this is an example of where we have overlaid the fishing pressure with the presence of a species. In this case, it's dugongs. And this was a project that we're helping coordinate in Trang in Thailand. But what we've done is basically said, okay, these are the areas where there's fishing, and these are the areas where there are dugongs. And then we overlay those in GIS, and we can come up with what we call a density hotspot priority setting. And so the darker areas in this graphic are areas where there is the most dugongs and the most fishing. And the middle colors, sort of medium numbers of dugongs, medium amounts of fishing pressure. And you get the idea. So if you were a manager and you had limited resources to invest in management and conservation, then where would you focus your initial attention? And graphics like these tell you, right, well, we need to be in these dark areas where the greatest threat to species occur. And so we're working on developing those at the moment for our shark and ray work in Sabah. But what we're going to do is we're actually breaking it down on a grid-based system so that instead of having these amorphous amoeba-looking density hotspot analysis, there'll actually be values per grid cell. And the reason for that is that from a fisheries management perspective, it's much easier to protect an area from a certain latitude and longitude to another one. And it's when you have a square grid, it's a much easier thing to demarcate and explain to fishermen. So that's where we're going with the data that we have. But we've already been in discussions with the fisheries department about potential time area closures or gear restrictions based on this novel data that's come out of the work KC and the rest of the team have been doing. Cognizant that there's probably a limited amount of time left. I want to move on quickly to this third example of some of the work we do. And this is probably one of the more exciting ones because it's in this location. You can see that we get paid to spend our days at the beach. But down there in the center of this photograph, you can see a little white blob, and that's our boat. And what we do is we go up to Mantanani, which is about 3 hours from Kota Kinabalu, where we run an in-water turtle population dynamics project. And in this project, what we're doing is we're capturing turtles by hand. We dive off a speedboat and catch them.
Hi, Nick. Hello. I think we lost you. Hopefully he can come back soon. Let me chat to him if he can respond. Sorry for the trouble. I think he will be back. Nick, you're on mute. Hello?
All right, sorry about that. I'm back.
Sure. Good.
So regional hatcheries were producing these high numbers of females, and the park manager had said, well, yeah, but this is natural. I said, no, it's not. This has to be the reason we're getting these high sex ratios is because the temperature in the hatchery is wrong. And so we started this program in Mantanani to demonstrate that in the wild, turtles were also facing very, very high skewed sex ratios. And we solved that problem, and I'll discuss that in just a moment. But as this project has evolved, so has come the very real and looming threat of climate change. And sex in a sea turtle is determined by temperature when the eggs are incubating in the sand. And so if you have a warming planet, then there is concern that there could be feminization of turtle stocks. And that's something that we're also now constantly monitoring through this Mantanani project. And I'll demonstrate how this work led to policy change in Malaysia. Let's see if it, so the biggest problem for us is that the turtles that we were finding on Mantanani are all juveniles. And when you have juvenile turtles, you cannot tell them apart from external characteristics between male and female. As you can see in this image, the turtle on your left is a female, the turtle in the center is a male, the turtle on the right ended up being a female, I can tell you that. But normally when turtles become adults, we can sex them. If a turtle has a very large tail, then there is a chance it's an adult male. But when they're juveniles like this, we can't tell the difference. And so we use laparoscopy, which is a small surgical procedure to go inside And there we go. So we can use a scope and we can look inside of a sea turtle. And then we can determine whether it has these granular ovaries, such as the image on the left, or very smooth testes, such as the image on the right. And by determining the proportion of males and females, we can then understand whether or not the regional hatcheries or potentially climate change are having an impact and skewing populations. So let me tell you about how this worked. In 2006, when we started, you could see we had about 90% female turtles. And using genetics, we were able to determine that a big proportion of these turtles were coming from this one particular park with these irregular hatchery practices. And I took these data to the park management and said, look, we have a 90% female stock, and a big chunk of these turtles come from your islands. And all of a sudden, there was sort of mass panic, like this is not good. And they allowed shading over the hatchery and started shading greater proportions of the hatchery. And if you follow what's happened over time, is that there has been this gradual but steady reduction in the proportion of females since that management response. Now, of course, you would not expect to see an immediate response because turtles are actually coming from a number of other hatcheries and regions as well. But what this graph shows is that by us being able to demonstrate through the use of laparoscopy and genetics that the park was having a negative impact on wild sea turtle stocks, that led to a management change and the probable long-term survival of this population. We now know that the park is not having any impact on sex ratios at all. And in some ways you could think, well, we could just cancel the project and move on. But as I said, climate change came along and we started focusing on that rather than on the impacts of hatcheries, because climate might indeed have an impact. And just briefly, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I can tell you that I run a similar project like this in Iran, and I've done similar work in United Arab Emirates and also in Qatar. And the reason for that is all of those three locations are in the Arabian Gulf, which is extremely, extremely hot during the summer. Temperatures can happily reach 50 degrees Celsius. And so if you were going to see a feminization of stocks, you would certainly expect to see it somewhere like the Arabian Gulf. And I like to liken the Arabian Gulf to a bit of a living laboratory for studying climate change. And guess what I found? There's no bias at all. And what that tells you is that evolutionarily, sea turtles have this ability to adapt to these changing climates. And if you think back, just in the last 5,000 years, we have seen these increases and decreases in temperature across the entire planet. And if turtles were not able to adapt to that, they would have gone extinct by now. Now, the only remaining question is that we know turtles have the ability to adapt and change this temperature regime within which they can produce males and females. What we don't know is whether they are able to adapt to the current rate of change. And what I mean by that is that the current warming of the planet is happening at roughly 4 times faster than it has happened in the last 5,000 years. And so turtles, yes, we can adapt, but can we adapt in time? That's the unknown. And I just thought I'd because Halim and Regina are here, I thought I'd at least show one genetic slide just to please you. But our initial stock analysis of the turtles from Mantanani shows that the majority come from these three main rookeries. And interestingly enough, those three places are the three places with hatcheries. And those three places are the places that needed monitoring. And then I prepared this slide a while back just for a popular talk, but it kind of gives you this mental picture of where the turtles are coming from. So you've got, and the arrows are sort of scaled in size. You've got three main contributing nesting sites, the Sabah ones in blue, the Sarawak ones in orange, and then Peninsula Malaysia in white. But there is also some genetic signatures being picked up from Western Australia, from Aru in Indonesia, and even from as far away as Papua New Guinea. Now, for the non-geneticists in the room, don't think for a minute that a turtle just swam up from Cape York, from Western Cape in Western Australia to Mantanani just so that we could capture it. What this graphic is telling you is that we have some evidence that turtles from these regions have moved around in the past, and that some of that genetic material still remains up here at Mantanani. But you can see just how far away, we're talking about the better part of 2,500 kilometers, if not further, to create the genetic lineage that exists on that one little baby island in Mantanani. Anyway, this was just another example of how research, well-placed research, can lead to management changes that end up saving a sea turtle population. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions and leave you just watching this little video. And this video was taken by this turtle right here, not by us. But what we did was, taking advantage of the fact that we were working with turtles on Mantanani,